Hi everyone, and welcome back to Inside Broadway's Careers in Theater video series. I am Baruch Shemtov, and we have a very special treat for you here today. We have a guest who's a performer, a writer, a producer, and she's here to explain that when you work in show business, it really is a business. Now, we're about to learn about one of America's greatest actresses as well. You may have never heard of Dorothy Dandridge, but after our conversation today, you'll know all about her and you'll know why she's so important. Now, first let me tell you a little bit about our amazing guest. So, she's a New York native, and just like you, she went to a New York City public school. She went on to star in her first Broadway show back in 2010 called Sondheim on Sondheim. Then she starred in Motown the Musical as Mary Wells. And by the way, guys, Mary Wells is considered to be the queen of Motown, and our guest today performed as Mary. And when Broadway reopens, hopefully very, very soon, she'll be starring in the revival of Caroline or Change as the Moon. Now today, she's here to talk to us about an upcoming exciting project that she's working on. She'll also tell us all about her incredible path, her incredible career. Please welcome Nikenji.
Thank you.
How are you, Nikenji? It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. So happy to be here. So happy to be a part of Inside Broadway.
Well, we are thrilled that you're here to share your amazing story with all of us. And I want to start by going back in time. Where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up? I grew up in Bronx, New York. Went to PS 95.
Woo!
Woohoo! Yes. So, I mean, when we say the Bronx, we're saying like all the way up, like second to last stop on the number 4 train, Motown Parkway. I also grew up in Tracy Towers, which was like the tallest building in the Bronx at the time. Probably not anymore. But it was great because we were uptown in the Bronx. There was lots of greenery. There was a huge park in front of our building, and I just loved PS 95. PS 95 was so special to me because of the fact that that is where I had a 5th grade teacher that found my voice. And that spiraled into what I'm doing right now.
So would you say that you were a theater kid at the time?
So, I don't think I was a theater kid quite yet. My mother put me in music lessons at a very young age. I apparently was like bouncing off the walls, like full of energy. And so the doctor told my parents that they needed to give me some kind of medication to kind of calm me down. And my parents were like, absolutely not. So what they did at age 4 is just put me in the arts. So they put me in dance, they put me in piano lessons, and apparently my mother noticed that I had some kind of vocal ability when I was about 6 months old. She would play, like she would run the water for baths, and then I would start singing to it, like the sound of the music, and my mom would tell my dad, like, honey, look, she's singing. She doesn't even talk, but she's singing. And he's like, well, I can't hear. She'd turn like the bath water off, and then I would just like, right?
You needed accompaniment. You're not going to sing without accompaniment.
Yeah, so I needed the bath water to accompany me for my singing. But it wasn't until I was 10 years old, and I was playing the piano for the auditions for the musical Snoopy. And during the breaks, I would sing the song that I kept hearing everyone singing, which was Poor Sweet Baby. And so one moment I was singing, poor sweet baby, poor sweet, sweet baby. Like I would like just like scream that part out. And my 5th grade teacher was like, Nikenji, sing that again? And then I sang it, and she's like, well, you will be playing the role of Patty.
Wow.
Yes.
So you inadvertently auditioned for the part.
Yes.
Wow.
With no intentions of singing at all. I was like, I was playing the piano for like the kids. And and I got Patty, and I was sitting on top of a grand piano like this, and I was really tiny. So like in 5th grade, I looked like I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. And so they put me on top of a piano, and I got a standing ovation. A standing ovation. So, I mean, can you just understand, like, at the age of 10, to receive a standing ovation that changed my entire life. the idea that I could do something that made that many people happy, I said to myself, well, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. And so that is what started the life of being a singer and an entertainer.
Wow, so that one pivotal moment awakened you to your talent
Yes.
and changed everything.
Yes, at PS 95.
Wow.
Miss Hartnick.
Miss Hartnick, shout out to Miss Hartnick, having a really good eye and a really good ear.
Yes.
So since Ms. Hartnick recognized your talents, what kind of training and education did you pursue after that?
Yes, well, so Snoopy was, and they did like a mixture, because schools, they're always picking and choosing. So it was like a mixture of Snoopy with like You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. It was a combo of those two musicals. So I became a theater kid then. I was like, oh my God, theater, I love theater. And I also loved pop and R&B. So I wanted to be like the next Mariah Carey, the next Whitney Houston. And so at Harlem School of the Arts, I got told to go to Harlem School of the Arts for after school to learn how to sing. And so I went to a vocal teacher, Miss Yvonne Hatchett, who heard the potential of something more than just pop or theater. She started training me classically. And so instead of learning like the Whitney Houston riffs and the Mariah Carey riffs that I wanted to learn, which I did eventually learn, but she was teaching me like the Italian songs, the French chanson, the Schubert lieder, and I was like, why am I learning all of this? And so she says, because I see that there's more for you. And so I started being trained as a classical singer at age 12.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that went into LaGuardia High School of Performing Arts. I was in a New York City children's choir when I was at the Cathedral School. I went there for 2 years. And I had the opportunity of singing in a choir at Carnegie Hall at 12 years old. And that was, I've never been in any kind of hall like that in my entire life, or even seen a show, I grew up in the Bronx. Like we weren't, my parents weren't taking me to like the Met or, Carnegie Hall concerts, and at that time, like I was like, wow, so there's more, so I could do all of this. Like I could do the classical, I could do the pop, I could do the musical theater. And so I went to LaGuardia High School and started training classically and still doing my musical theater, still doing my pop, and then went to Manhattan School of Music for my undergrad, and then I got my master's at the Julliard School.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a series of schools.
All in New York.
I love that. And by the way, I think there's an interesting message there, which is you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. You can sing opera and pop and R&B, and you can rap, and you can mix it all together.
Absolutely.
And just do whatever speaks to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we've kind of embraced that now, but back then, I was always told that I needed to decide. Like you can't possibly be, one couldn't take you seriously if you were all over the place. And I said, but I've learned how to transition from one style to the other seamlessly. I mean, that became my specialty, to be able to do that. And so then I had to basically make a category of my own, because I was not going to accept the idea that I had to choose. And when people make you think that you can only do one thing, then that's not the advice that you want to pursue.
Right. Start following your own advice instead of their advice when they tell you that.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, a lot of our students watching right now are missing their in-person rehearsals. They're missing in-person classes. Some people are watching our video in their classroom. Some are watching from home. But bottom line, teachers are extra challenged today as they seek to inspire students, teach students, keep everyone engaged during such a challenging time. When we think about the teachers who made a difference in your life, you've mentioned a couple of them already.
Yes.
Is there somebody who really stands out as having made a major impact on your life?
Wow. There's so many. I would say, well, I did mention some of those teachers. Yvonne Hatchett, who at Harlem School of the Arts really did truly identify my potential. So she definitely made an amazing impact on my life. Betty Allen, who is no longer with us, was the president of Harlem School of the Arts. And she had these master voice classes. And I got involved in these master voice classes literally because someone pushed me into her class on purpose. And it was like these master voice classes were every Saturday. It was like the highest of the highest opera singers would come and study with Betty Allen. And Betty Allen had sung with, she had music written for her. She had scores that like Bernstein would like write in her scores like, oh, I love you so much, Miss Allen, so great that we like collaborated on this project. She also had music scores that were like out of print, and composers that she worked with. And so she was training all the people at the Metropolitan Opera House, City Opera. People would travel from like all over to be in Betty Allen's master voice class. And so I was playing with my friends, and it was all for adults. I was, I think, 13 or 14 at the time, and you would always hear Betty Allen screaming at people. And so everyone was scared of her. And so someone pushed me into her room while she was screaming at someone, and she was like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "I'm the Kenji." And she's like, "What are you doing in my room? What do you do?" And I was like, "I'm a singer." "You're a singer? Go up there and sing." And I was like, and you heard all of my friends in the back going like snickering, right? And I sang, I don't know what I sang. I think I sang like Vittoria or something, one of the songs from the Italian songbook. And she coached me and screamed at me sometimes. And then all the adults were like, "You can't scream at her. Like, she's a child." She's like, "Yes, she's a child, but she's going to a business full of adults. So if she wants to learn, she has to grow some backbone and some skin." And and she'd say things like, "That's a really pretty necklace you're wearing. Do you want to keep it?" She was like, "So open up." And so I would do this. And then after that coaching, she's like, "So I expect to see you here next week at 10 o'clock. And she got this school to give me full scholarship to attend her class. And I was the youngest in her class and doing these master voice classes with Betty Allen and all these amazing singers that were singing at the Met, and just having all these mentors around me. And Betty Allen would have me like work for her after school, and I would like organize her music and sing. That's why I knew like all these sheet music, like with the composer writing to her and stuff. And up until she died, she was always very, very supportive of me. It was because of her that I sang with Wynton Marsalis at Lincoln Center. They did a collaboration with like Jazz at Lincoln Center and Chamber Music Society. I was like in high school or something at the time, and it was on my birthday, and Wynton Marsalis found out that it was my birthday and literally serenaded me at Alice Tully Hall, like playing Happy Birthday on his horn. I was like, oh my God. And just, opportunities. WQXR would do a radiothon every year where Betty Allen was hosting it, and she'd always have me performing. So, Betty Allen on top of Barbara Hartnick and Yvonne Hatchett, and then of course my teacher, Edith Burrs, who was my teacher straight from Manhattan School of Music as well as Julliard. She was my teacher the entire time, because a lot of the teachers taught at both schools.
Now, how important was all that training that you just mentioned?
Oh my God, it was priceless. It was, and it's not just the training, but it's the mentorship and the wisdom that they passed on to me about always working hard, always having to be prepared, always doing extra, like going above and beyond the call of duty, going above what they expect you to do, doing research. For classical music was a completely different world because you're singing in a different language. And so when I would prepare a classical piece, I would have to, now everything's digital, but we would have like the Nico Castell books, and we'd have to like do the International Phonetic Alphabet so that you can actually sing in that language and sound native. And you'd have to, you'd have to translate word for word. You have to know like every word that you're singing. Like you can't just have an idea of what you're singing, you know. You have to know word for word. So I learned languages through in Julliard and Manhattan School of Music. I had coachings every week. If someone was sick, they put like a coaching on like the board at Julliard, and if you're free, you can grab a coach, and like you'd have all these free coachings as part of the curriculum that you would normally pay like $150 an hour for. We'd have, there was one week I had like a French coaching, a Russian coaching, a German coaching, like all of that stuff, and so now I'm able to sing in 11 languages because of all of that training.
And you understand the intention of the words,
Absolutely.
of the lyrics.
Yeah, everything. I don't speak fluently in those languages, but those pieces, let's see, I can tell you word for word, like what every word meant and the intention behind it.
Love that. Now, at the beginning, I mentioned your first ever Broadway show back in 2010, Sondheim on Sondheim.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Amazing. It was amazing. It was one of those scenarios where like you had to pinch yourself. I got a chance to work with James Lapine, who is a great, great director and writer as well, and Stephen Sondheim. Like being in the room with Stephen Sondheim, not only did I get a chance to work with him, he would type these letters to me and leave them backstage of like, what a great job you're doing.
Sondheim would?
Yes.
Sondheim's a big deal, by the way, guys. Sondheim's a big deal.
He's a big deal. And so, like, you knew, like, there were these little cards, like, he written these things, and I'm like, I still have them. And so, and working with Vanessa Williams, and Norm Lewis, and Barbara Cook. My God, she's a legend who, is no longer with us, but I got a chance to work with Barbara Cook, who's a legend in the theater world, and that was, talk about like a learning experience, like, being from the opera world and doing theater, regional theater, and then doing like my first Broadway show. It was really great to be able to work with, and it was a small cast, so be able to work with all of these great artists, and Stephen Sondheim himself was like, that was priceless as well. Yes.
Wow, now let's talk about Motown the Musical.
Yes.
You played Mary Wells, who was instrumental in the development of Motown, which really played a big part in defining what American music is.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
That experience was a dream come true. First of all, Motown, Motown music is just so, like, people have, it's been around since the 50s, and you still have artists to this day that came out of Motown, like Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson, that are still performing, like, to this day. And all their music that came out of there is timeless, it's, and being able to work on Mary Wells, she was the first female superstar from Motown. This is before the Supremes, before Diana Ross, and she was the one with My Guy that crossed the R&B charts to pop. You had the Beatles that wanted to perform with Mary Wells, like she was like the top of her game. My Guy was written by Smokey Robinson. So Mary Wells being able to play a woman that was so pivotal in our American history, because Motown is definitely part of American history, and it became an international phenomenon. It was great. And working with Berry Gordy, he has been my mentor for many years and is still my mentor. He's so wise, and every time I have a conversation with Berry Gordy, like, he has something pivotal to say, and you're like, wow, okay.
And that's why he's Berry Gordy.
And that's why he's Berry Gordy. That is why.
Tell our students who Berry Gordy is.
Berry Gordy single-handedly started Motown Records, Motown Music. He is the one who, in Detroit, Michigan, he is the one who discovered Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, Mary Wells, oh my God, the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson, my gosh, the list goes on. Gladys Knight, The Temptations, the list goes on. Motown, and not only were they just a record company, they groomed these artists. Like, so you had someone talking about how to hold themselves. Like he created a style for all of them. They had these amazing songwriters as part of their team that like they would write for all these different artists, and then there would come like this quality control meetings where they'd have to vote on like which song is the hit song that they're going to record on that artist. So like everything from like beginning to end was absolutely meticulous when it came to grooming and making these stars, and that was Berry Gordy.
Love it. What a mentor to have, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And now we're here to talk about a very important new project of yours. It's called Dorothy Dandridge Musical.
Yes.
It's your project, you're producing it, you're starring in it, and I had never heard of Dorothy Dandridge before, and I'm sure there are other people out there who may not have heard of her. She was a major star in Hollywood in the 40s and 50s. She was very glamorous, but she was also a major trailblazer.
Yes.
So we're very excited to learn more about her. Tell us why she's so important.
Wow, there's on many, many levels, Dorothy Dandridge was a legend. First thing is, she was the very first African-American female to be nominated for an Oscar in the Outstanding Leading Actress category. First ever. At that time, Black women were always portrayed as nurses or maids or housekeepers, and she was the first to star in a movie, which was Carmen Jones, and be a leading actress. Hollywood did not look at African American women in that type of bubble of a scenario, and so Dorothy Dandridge broke the ceiling for that. She was also an activist. She was a triple threat. She sang, she acted, she danced. She did a thing, Chattanooga Choo Choo, with the Nicholas brothers, who are also a very famous brother duo of tap dancers. There are many movies that she did that she didn't get credit for. And because she reached such a great height for African American women at that time, Hollywood didn't really know what to do with her after that, because she was a leading lady and roles weren't being written for Black women as leading ladies at the time. And so she had to cross over to Europe to do a lot of movies there in order to continue, pivoting her career in that leading lady role. There was a lot of laws, like no interracial kissing on screen at the time, and in Europe that wasn't the case. Or movies that she would do that would only be played in the North but not the South. So she went through a whole time period during the Civil Rights Movement. She was a big supporter of Dr. King. Dr. King actually had her speaking on a number of occasions where she was, representing as an actress, but she was also an activist. When she started getting really large, she was the first Black woman to be Black artist to do a solo performance at the Waldorf Astoria. And also when she started getting very big, she would have in her contracts that the tables in the front had to be reserved for the NAACP.
Wow.
Which was unheard of. Like, you just couldn't do that. And so she, not only was she considered this beautiful African-American actress that was kind of, beyond her years when it comes to breaking the ceiling, but she also was very much involved in being an activist and speaking up for the rights of Black artists and diversity in the venues that she'd be performing in. She did not want to be performing for all white venues. She still at that time was being, had to go around through the kitchen to into the theater, and just crazy stuff. That we hear about all the time, but she prevailed. Like, she was a kid that would perform all around. They call it the Chitlin Circuit. But the Chitlin Circuit for her and the Dandridge sisters were all was organized by the churches. So the Chitlin Circuit didn't really mean that you were like performing in like, you know, little small huts. It meant that there were these churches that would have these beautiful events having the Dandridge sisters, you know, performing. And so by the time she got to Hollywood, she had already had her experience as a child from age, I think, 5, performing for people. And, you know, churchgoers were always like in their hats and beautiful and suits and dresses. So she was in that business at a very young age, and she is a legend. And I realized that Halle Berry did a movie of her introducing Dorothy Dandridge on HBO, and but no one has ever done a musical on her life. And because she did the Carmen Jones, because she was a trailblazer when it came to performing in these venues like the Waldorf Astoria, the casinos, and all that stuff. This would be the first musical that would have the variety of genres. So we would have the opera from Carmen Jones, we'd have the jazz music, and then we also will have original music.
Love it.
Yes.
Love it. That's a lot to look up to in one woman. Have you always been inspired by her?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was always told that, you know, she was just, I mean, at the time when she was growing up, they considered her like the Black Marilyn Monroe. You know, that was her. But she was more than that. You know, but that's sort of how our society was able to label her, because they didn't really know almost what to do with her. You know, so you make the reference, you know, but she, you know, I remember her and Marilyn Monroe were very good friends, and they met at the Actors Lab, and there was a part where Marilyn Monroe was like, "Oh, you sing too?" You know, and just having, you know, knowing that they had this relationship, this friendship from the Actors Lab, and, you know, and Marilyn like really looking up to Dorothy Dandridge as this inspiration of like, you're not just a pretty face, but you actually have talent, and you sing and you dance too on top of acting. So yeah, it's this musical really talks about her journey and celebrates her life and her activism and her performing, and her relationships with Marilyn Monroe is in the musical, along with the Nicholas brothers and her mother and her sister Vivian Dandridge. So there is a lot of Harry Belafonte. You know, they did some movies together, many major movies, which was Carmen Jones, and Porgy and Bess was with Sidney Poitier. So we have lots and lots of good material that we've been able to pull from to make this musical like an unbelievable piece.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of our audience right now are young people, but I'm sure there's something that they can really connect to in Miss Dandridge, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of things that happen in her life that is very parallel to what's going on in our world today. The civil rights movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the performing at a young age, the fact that she was training at such a young age, and so all the kids out there that know about music or picking up an instrument and having teachers, I mean, this is what Dorothy was going through as a young kid. So she grew up in the business, being exposed to the arts at a very young age, which of course is what you guys are doing right now, being exposed to theater, being exposed to lessons, music, and how to make music, the theory side of music, being on stage, all the performing aspects, the costumes, the makeup, all of that stuff. So there's a scene in the Dorothy Dandridge musical where we actually have her transforming herself for the audition for Otto Preminger, because he did not see her as like a sexy siren. She was very conservative, But on stage, she had to play another part, playing the role of what the audience expected her to play. So there's a scene where we do the whole transformation of her coming from like this very shy individual into this sexy siren with the makeup and the outfit and the body language, and that's how she landed that role.
Wow. Who would you say in Hollywood today reminds you of Dorothy Dandridge?
Oh, wow. There's so many artists out there that wouldn't be where they are now without Dorothy Dandridge breaking that ceiling. I would say some of the younger ones, like Zendaya would be one. Who else? Kerry Washington, Viola Davis. They're all not, I mean, it's not the same because Dorothy Dandridge was, she was an activist. So some of these people I think of as Kerry Washington, Viola Davis being actresses that are activists as well. But I almost don't think that there is someone who is identical to Dorothy. I think she was just one of a kind. But I feel that her legend, her legacy is something that we all can rise to meet.
What would you say her biggest accomplishments were?
Her biggest accomplishments would have been the Oscar nomination. That was a historical moment. Oh yes, Sounds of New York City.
Yes, you have live accompaniment, guys.
Yes.
Okay, now, do you ever sing to the sirens like you used to sing to the bathwater?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And then we can change it to yeah.
Yes. By the way, I think that is so important. Growing up in New York, wherever you are right now, you can either get annoyed by the sirens or you can harmonize to the sirens. That's your choice, people.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. You make what it is, the ingredients that's given to you,
Yep.
you make a recipe out of it. It doesn't matter what it is.
You make it delicious.
Yes. I love making something delicious.
Now we have a very special treat for you guys. You may not be able to get into a Broadway theater right now, but we are bringing Broadway to you. And Mackenzie will be performing some songs for us today. Tell us about the first song.
I will be doing Riding High from Cole Porter, which is also in the Dorothy Dandridge musical. And, when Dorothy was not performing on the big screen in movies, there's lots of, like between Carmen Jones and Porgy and Bess, I think it was like a 2 or 3 year span. So she headlined a lot of venues, casinos, big hotels, kind of like what we would consider like the Carlisle here, Waldorf Astoria, and Riding High was a Cole Porter piece that she used to do a lot. And so I wanted to do Riding High for all of you so that you can have a little snippet of the music that's going to be expressed and showcased at Dorothy Dandridge Musical.
Take it away.
Okay, great.
I love
That was beautiful. Guys, can I hear your applause at home? That's a little louder.
Thank
Woo! Nikenji. By the way, it must be so strange for you performing without having that immediate feedback from 1,000 people.
Yes, it's something that I'll never get used to, which is why live theater needs to come back very, very soon.
Amen.
Yes, but it's so great to be able to do a live performance with Shelton Beckton, and it gives me hope of just having that feeling, that energy gives me hope of the theater coming back very soon.
Amen. Now, we spoke about why Dorothy Dandridge is so important to you. Why did you feel like you had to tell her story through a musical?
I felt that, well, first of all, music is my passion. So when I am thinking about something or trying to create something, it's through music. And I feel that music gets to people in ways that nothing else can get to them. There is something magical about music when you hear something. There's times when audience members will be sitting and listening to something and they have no idea why, but suddenly they start crying or something about music hits you. We can't understand the physics of all of that, but there's something about music. And so when I was thinking of working with Berry Gordy, made me realize that it was important for us to tell our own stories, okay? And him telling his story of Motown or about other artists made me realize that I needed to start creating something that was important to me. Dorothy Dandridge is someone that I completely honored for so many years, and I felt that her story hasn't truly been told, the way it should, like all the different aspects of her, and I thought that music was the best way of showcasing her life and celebrating her life and letting people know that this woman existed. There's things that opportunities that we wouldn't have had today if it wasn't for this woman, and how she is this great inspiration. So that is why I thought doing a musical on Dorothy Dandridge was important, and also important to do a musical that incorporated various styles of music so that it could relate to multiple people from all walks of life.
And what is the power of a song to help tell a story in a musical?
The power of, there's when you hear a piece, and our goal is that we're, by the time you start one song and by the time you get to the end of that song, we should have moved to a different place. All right, the power of the song is to tell the story, and to be able to express something that you can't express in dialogue. So you have these plays, which are great. I love plays, but for musicals, you have the dialogue, but then there's information that you just can't express enough unless you go through a song. And that song heightens the emotion, that song heightens the ability to get to that one person in the audience. If I'm able to move one person in an audience of how big of that audience, I know I've done my job for the day.
Wow. And in the beginning of the conversation, we mentioned the term show business, and you really exemplify what it means to be a business woman. You're a triple threat. You're a performer, you're a writer, you're a producer. What does it mean to you to be a businesswoman?
To be a businesswoman?
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. With being in the music industry, you're not always taught the business side of the music. All right, you're taught to train, to write pretty music, sing pretty songs, and go on stage. And there's a whole different side of music that incorporates the business side of music. Now, I grew up when I was 10 years old. My mother got separated with my dad, and my father told my mother, he said, you need to find a real job, an apartment you can afford. And my mother had $75 to her name. And she invested her money into a staffing agency. And I grew up watching my mother, and mind you, my mother was, on top of all the teachers, my mother was like my biggest mentor. I watched my mother start with $75 and grow this staffing agency into this mega company that had offices in Manhattan, Westchester, and Tampa, Florida.
Wow.
And starting from like sharing an office to having a small little office to herself, and then bigger and bigger and bigger. And I learned the business, not the music business, but I learned the business from my mother. So to keep me out of trouble, she would make sure that I came to the office after school instead of hanging out with my friends who were getting to things that we don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
But she knew, because she was a single mom at that time, and then she remarried later on, which I had a great second dad, Marty Hoffman, bless his heart, he's looking down on us. But she knew that she, as a single mom, to build a business and to raise a child, she had to make sure I was with her. And so I started filing papers and answering the telephones, and I started interviewing people, and I started doing, and then my mom would send me out as a temp.
How old were you?
I was interviewing people at like age 13 or 14.
Okay, so somebody comes in for an interview, and here's a 13-year-old girl saying, well, what are your qualifications? How did they respond?
Let's just say I was like the initial interviewer, and then eventually they'd get to like the headhunter.
Okay.
But, I can tell you, I made sure, some of these people are like, really? I was like, so there's a big break between your last position, and so can you tell me why you left that last position and what you were doing between those 3 years before you got hired at the other company?
And they're like, you're in 7th grade.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So I was in the business, and my mother did, she built that business with the expectations that I would take it over, and that never happened because I loved music so much. But I learned so much about the business, and then my mother supported me in the music. So I learned, even though I went into music, I learned how to read contracts, being in my mom's company. I learned how to do interviews. When you go and sometimes people want to have an interview with you before they even hear you sing. They want to talk to you, whatever. So I learned about presentation. I learned about all of that stuff being in my mom's business. And then I became like the regional operations manager. And so while I was going to college, I was still working in the company. So while I was and then when I graduated, I was doing AIDA in Phoenix, and I would get phone calls because they couldn't get a hold of my mother. They would call me. So literally 5 minutes before I had to go on stage, I got a temp calling me saying, I can't go in tomorrow morning. I was like, what do you mean you can't go? I have to go on stage right now. And I think that was the pivotal moment where I was like, I can't do both.
Yeah.
I can't do both.
Choose a lane.
But I remember how important it was that's the other thing. We were a minority woman-owned agency, so we were all about trying to train our temps, get them off of unemployment, place them in companies. So the idea of work has always been top of you have to work. You have to work. You can't sit around and do nothing. You have to work. And those who worked and trained themselves, and those are the ones who survived and actually excelled in the companies. So with that said, the business side, I would say I learned from my mother. And then translating it into music was an easy transition.
And I think what's interesting there is, the idea of transferable skills. That means skills that you can take from one thing and put it into another. And there you took some really great business skills.
Yes.
And while somebody might have said, what am I going to learn at an agency? Well, you were able to take those same skills and apply them as a theater producer.
Yes.
Well, we definitely have some aspiring producers out there. Can you tell us, Nikenji, a little bit about what it means to be a producer and what you as a producer are doing next in developing Dorothy Dandridge musical?
Wow. Well, as a producer conceiver, I thought about the concept of this many years ago. But when you think about an idea, it's just an idea until you actually put things in motion. And at that time, I thought, okay, well, I have this concept. I know I want to do a musical on this great lady. How do I do that? And so I start reaching out to writers, and because as a producer, there's lots of different levels of producers. There's producers that just bring money to a project. There are producers that are part of conceiving an idea and then putting together a creative team. And that's the producer that I've been on this project. I basically started scouting out writers and music composers and having meetings with them and figuring out who would be best for this project. We ended up with an amazing team, one that you've already heard. Shelton Beckman is not just a music director and conductor, but he is also the composer of the Dorothy Dandridge musical, and we're super excited about that. And we also have two-time Emmy winner Trey Ellis, who is writing the musical. If you don't know Trey Ellis, you might know of the Dr. King documentary that he did a few years ago. But those are our components. You have to put together something, right? And then there's stages of development. Once you have like a first draft of a musical, as we are working on this project, like every 2 weeks we'd get together and we'd see what's been written. We'd listen to the music, we'd look at the script, and then we'd make pointers. We'd say, hey, what about this? And then they'd come back to the table with like, well, this is what we thought about this. So there's lots of give and take, lots of creative juices going through when you're putting this together. And then once you have something to present to people, then you have to start raising money and having opportunities to showcase the musical. And so Amos Musical Theater has been very instrumental in supporting the Dorothy Dandridge musical by overseeing readings. We have Carnegie Hall now that is interested in possibly doing our workshop presentation there for next season when theater opens. And you have to raise money for those developments. You know, sadly, it's not free to put together a musical at Carnegie Hall. We wish it was. So as a producer, I'm also reaching out to people who love music, who want to support musicals, who want to support the arts, who love the idea of Dorothy Dandridge and making sure that people know her name. And so there's lots of people that will come on board and invest money and to help develop the show. So then by the time we get to a commercial production, when you're actually at Broadway, it's a lot of money that's raised to get a show to Broadway. And those people who have invested money in the musical, when the musical starts making money, then everyone who invested and believed in the show gets money. They get their money back, and then they make money off of it. And that's how you get a Broadway musical, a successful Broadway musical, and then these Broadway musicals that will have tours around the US, and then they'll go to London. And my hope and my dreams for Dorothy Dandridge is to do Broadway and then London, national tours, and then some. Movie musical, you name it. Yes.
Wow,
yes.
Love that, love that. Well, it's time for another song.
Yes.
You guys want another song?
You want another song?
Let's do another song.
Okay.
And I know this one is from Carmen Jones.
Yes.
Tell us about the song.
This is That's Love. This was a song in Carmen Jones that Dorothy Dandridge is singing to Harry Belafonte. And this is going to be also in the Dorothy Dandridge musical.
Well, take it away.
Thank you.
And he won't pick on me.
so much for another beautiful song.
Thank you.
Now, what else are you working on right now, Nikenji?
I just signed a development deal with a TV producer, Gina Goff Productions, for a television show that I have created, and it's called Black Butterfly. And it is a show that is kind of like if those of you have watched Smash or Glee or Empire, it's like a mixture of all of that along with Ally McBeal, which is a very old show that you probably haven't seen. But the idea of this show is like a musical drama comedy, and it pushes the envelope, so we have dream segments. So then you'd have like someone talking, and then suddenly we go into like a big old like production of their dream, of what they've imagined, and then we go back to reality. So it allows me to push the envelope, but it is a story that is following a young black woman who is in Florida, who has given up on her dreams, and she has a child, and she sees that her friend was in an accident that had passed away, and she realized at that moment that dreams do not have deadlines. And we follow her path to New York, and we get the background of the big New York jungle city, and we get music from hip hop to Broadway, to opera, to jazz, to all sorts of musical genres that helps tell the story of this show. So I am a creator of it, I'm a producer of it, I'm in it, and I'm also a composer of the songs that are going to be in the show.
Wow, I'd watch that show.
Would you watch that show?
Would you watch it? I think we'd all watch that show. Congrats on
Black
that.
Butterfly. So yeah, and when you do a development deal, that means that the producer is pitching it to places like Netflix or Fox or ABC, things like that. So hopefully next season we'll have it.
Well, we can't wait to watch that. And everyone at home, everyone at school, join me in thanking Nikenji. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
and
having
congrats
me.
on everything that you're up to. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching.